Hello everybody, I am Ben from Team Panic, and today we are going to upgrade Annie. So Annie has been sitting on version 4 for a little while, and the last meet we put a brushless upgrade on her drive system, which worked out pretty well. So that's kind of spurred me into the idea of giving her a fairly complete overhaul. Some of the stuff is going to stay the same. The drive system is going to stay a brushless drive system, brushless YOLO drive, and the weapon system is going to stay fairly similar, just some small tweaks and bits and pieces. But what is actually wrong with Annie right now? Well, it's easier to see with her front plate off. With her front plate on, everything looks kind of okay, but with her front plate off, the big problem is actually these standoffs out here. So we need these standoffs to be able to move around the arena a lot better. Running on the weapon bolt just didn't end up working all that well. I kept getting caught on things as I tried to drive around the arena. So we need to have these standoffs here, but in Annie's current form, she's actually shorter than skinnier than she used to be. She used to be wider. She used to be out at where these standoffs were, and they're just bolted onto the side panels. But a little while ago, I shrunk her this way to reduce a bit of weight, and yeah, that meant that putting these buff blocks, these standoffs in, I needed these buff blocks in here. And this just means that whenever I get a hit on one of these standoffs, then there's a lot of force a lot of torque being produced and pushed into the bolts, which is likely going to bend them very, very quickly and just cause loads and loads of troubles, basically. And also, the weight distribution here isn't quite right. If I can move the wheels forwards a little bit more, that would be really helpful, but I can't at the moment because of these standoff blocks. Cool, so printed test pieces. This here is the new base plate for Annie, which, if you have a look at the underside of here, has a very similar idea in terms of it has a riser, which the weapon will run into rather than running into any of the bolts in the underside, which is a nice thing that I really liked about this version of Annie, and she is keeping moving forwards. You will also see that we actually have some pretty severe damage in here on the actual weapon mount itself. This is where the bearing has rubbed and eroded away the aluminium itself. So I'm actually going to need to put a washer in there, which is again part of the reason why I'm doing this, because I can then change this weapon stack up a little bit and add a washer into here so that I don't get this type of thing anymore. Wow. So I started this to see if this front housing had actually bent, and the answer is 100% yes. I don't even really need to hold up a straight something to show you how badly damaged this is. Let's see, what's the straightest thing I have right now though? Part like that. You can see how I've got a lot of rock in there. This thing is dead. Like, it's yeah, this isn't straight anymore. This is a long way from being a functional straight component in a combat robot. It is literally, yeah, bent through the middle. I would assume in one of the large hits from the last meet where Annie was thrown around a bunch of times. And including in that is these two bolts, which are the short bolts that go up into the smaller holes here. These two bolts are ever so slightly bent. They're not straight anymore, and I believe that's where the whole thing is collapsed in, and the HDP and the aluminium under here has tried to keep everything straight and locked in secure, but it's not been able to, and the bolt has instead bent. Yeah, so I will say, if we have a look at this, the mount points for the weapon are now further out, but I've also included some that are actually closer in than the original mount points. These two down the front here aren't mirrored anywhere in this design, so the actual leverage force is going to be smaller because we've got mounting points closer in together, which I'm hoping is going to help here. Because, yeah, that's a considerable amount of bending on what is, well, what should be the most solid piece in this entire design, and we're now making bigger, which means that, yeah, it could actually have more force on it. So though, yeah, hopefully, like I said, these new mounting positions are going to help that somewhat. And there we go, mostly complete now. This is the new weapon mount for the new version of Annie. Lines up pretty well with everything up through here. If I can maybe get that on camera, I don't know. But the bolt holes all line up and everything is looking pretty good actually from my perspective. So that's everything cut and drilled. Now what we need to do is we need to put in the riv nuts that hold in the front armor. But before we do that, because those rib nuts are a large element that sit out backwards, we actually need to install this piece. This piece is a sliding ABS block that sits in the middle, and it's actually where the weapon mount attaches into. So these two bolts here that attach the whole weapon mount setup onto the robot, they actually bolt straight into a drilled and tapped ABS block, and that's what this is. So we need to tap this up, get this situated in just the right spot, mount it down with some M4 bolts, and then once we've done that, we can go ahead and put in our rib nuts, because once they're in, you cannot get this block back out either way, realistically. So it's important that this is in first. And here we go. I have jumped ahead a little bit in the build process because we will go ahead and do all of this build in a little bit once I've got all of the parts cut out of HDPE. But for now, I've just got all of the 3D printed parts in place and ready to go. And you can see here that this thing is locked together jigsaw puzzle style. So if we were to take another really massive hit on the back, as we've done in the past, the jigsaw puzzle pieces holding this thing together will stop Annie from coming apart and having the back panel ripped off. That does mean, of course, that, yeah, if we get a really, really bad hit like that, it could potentially twist the frame. But yeah, I don't know. We'll see how we go with that. I think it's just going to tear a chunk out because it's all going to be HDPE. So the reason though that I did all of this before cutting anything was making sure weight balances and things were right. So first of all, we can see that the weapon spins and it's actually a lot closer to the ground than it was before. I would say it's only kind of 5 mil off the ground now, which is nice. I really, really like that. And I really can't get it too much closer because there are still bolt heads in underneath the weapon stack. So we can't go much further than that. I will also say if I throw around the back and spin the weapon again, you can see that we do indeed get weapon contact out the back of Annie. A decent amount too. Well, enough. She'll be able to hit things if I back up into them. It does also mean that I need to be careful about being shoved into the wall because that will now stop Annie's weapon from working entirely. Also, I was a little bit suspect of the design. I thought that I might be tilting forwards or backwards, but I seem to be sitting fairly flush. At least the weapon mount is sitting fairly flush, and realistically, that's the only thing I care about at this point, because if the weapon's sitting flush, that's all that really matters. Everything else can sit a little bit wonky and it doesn't matter as long as the weapon doesn't hit the ground at the front or the back during a spin. Finally, the final thing that we wanted to know in here is balance of the robot. So the big thing for balance is making sure that there's not too much weight on these two front standoffs and that we're actually going to be able to drive using the motors. Now, this is the easy test for this, is build the robot, put it all together, and then just push the wheels. Does the robot move? If the robot moves, then everything's fine because there's enough weight resting on these that you're not breaking traction. And I'm touching this really quite lightly and I'm still getting movement out of Annie. So that is all well and good. Also, of course, she should have her front plate back on. That does indeed fit. We've done this already before, but yeah. It's interesting. The other thing too I will say is I do kind of like Annie being purple like this. It's really nice. I like this purple but painting HDPE is hard. So I'm not going to get to do that for this video or indeed for her next fight. But if you want me to try something like that in the future, please let me know in the comments down below. So that's the new base all bolted together. It's actually fairly rigid as it stands, and it's going to get better when we bolt the weapon mount in. That's going to add a bit more rigidity in there. But before we get to that, we actually need to bolt up wheels and a few other bits and pieces. I've also left some bolt holes in here to add some extra mounting brackets if need be, but I'm going to run without them for the first event. See how this all goes just with the wood screws holding it all together, which should be enough, I think. So this is annoying. Everything is mostly together with the new plastic parts, which are, you know, just copies of these 3D printed plastic parts just done on the CNC machine. And well, this wheel, totally fine. This wheel, not so fine. If I push down, like really put force on it, it goes. But if I don't, if I just kind of touch it, it's actually balancing not on this point. So yeah, it looks like I've got some like elephant footing or something happening on my little 3D printed parts, and they bumped it down by 0.5 millimeter or something, and that's just enough to get the thing to actually work as compared to the CNC parts, which don't have that, which is not fun. So I'm gonna have to find another way around this to get this all working. But the chassis as a whole has come together pretty well, I think. So, yeah. And we're back. She's basically done now. I have done something interesting to fix the problem. I've gone to the purple one on one side and also a little bit of duct tape to buff it out to just the right level to allow both wheels to touch the ground. I've also refitted the electronics and put a top plate down. Everything is working pretty well, so let's give Annie a test drive. So there we go, she is back up and running again. Obviously I did not spin the weapon up in that test. I don't even have a weapon belt on at the moment because I don't really have a safe place to test Annie's weapon. It is quite powerful. I really need to make a bigger test box at some point in the future. So probably a while away yet. Anyway, she is now back up and running. I am going to recut this standoff. I'm going to measure it out and I'm going to recut this off camera. You guys don't need to see me bother about all of that. And there's a few other little tweaks. I just want to Loctite some motors and stuff in place. But other than that, Annie is now ready to fight at ARC's next meet, which is actually very, very soon. So anyway, I hope you guys have enjoyed this one and I will see you in the next video.